someone told me, it's like, well, if you do it yourself, then the label knows that you're willing to work hard. It's so easy to make music nowadays, especially with like digital works or workstations. But they were telling me like, hey, if you're willing to actually go out, promote yourself, release yourself, all that stuff, then even though maybe you don't have like 1,000 followers, at least the label knows, hey, this guy's willing to hustle and they're willing to push their own stuff. And so they're a hard worker on top of being a good producer as well. So that's
all right. Hey, what's up, everyone? We are here back again for another Artist Map, not Artist Mac. Artist Map and Faculty of Electronic Music YouTube video series where we answer questions and we give feedbacks and our thought pieces in terms of, things that relate to the artists and the electronic music industry. We have Kevin Chang, aka SVS, and we have Gino, aka Atrox here, and I am Gia with Artist Map. So let's start with this week's question. I actually like this question. I think it's something that a lot of artists definitely contemplate a lot. Take it over, Kevin.
Yeah, so this is definitely a legit question, I'm sure, for everyone out there. I've sent out not a bunch of demos, but at least for this set of tracks that I have, I sent out a good amount. And it got to a point where it's just, okay, well, I'm not really getting any good feedback from this, but a lot of people are saying these tracks hit, and so people are saying, you know what, why don't you just self-release, not necessarily create your own label, but hey, you got Bandcamp, you have a lot of different resources, self-release the tracks, promote it yourself, and then go from there. And I was curious what you guys thought, because I know from the amount of demos I sent out, it wasn't that much. It's probably about 10, which I know is a pretty small number. But people are saying, oh, you know what, just try to self-release it, see what happens instead, because you've been doing this whole sending out demos for a long time, and maybe at this point these tracks are really good. Try seeing about sending it out by yourself. So I was curious what you guys thought.
And in terms of being able to self-release on Bandcamp.
Yeah, either Bandcamp or heck, even you can just go through DistroKid and just put it up on Spotify yourself. You don't necessarily need to go through a label.
Right.
There's a lot of different resources that you could do. And a lot of people are just saying, you know what, like these are a good set of tracks and you've done it, the demo were out for a long time. Why not just try to do a self-release route this time?
Right. Gino, what do you think? Do you want to answer first, or do you want me to?
First, I can start off with, if you're in the beginning stages of releasing, right, and you haven't released yet, and you've only sent 10 demos, you haven't even scratched the surface of how many demos you should be sending out. And to give you an example, now there's different times, because when I started sending out demos, Bandcamp didn't exist. But I got a list of emails this long of like 50, 60 different labels, all techno labels, and I just sent to every one of them. I didn't even know what some of the labels were. And just to give you an example, one of the labels at the time that I didn't know who it was Kraftek. And I accidentally got signed to Kraftek not knowing what Kraftek was. It was just in that list of email. The point was, I just wanted my music out there really bad. I would spend at least one day a month spending hours searching for emails, creating an email list, and going further and sending every month till somebody grabbed. Because I can tell you right now, even big artists can go and send 10 demos right now and they're not going to get a response. It really is the case. So
can I ask a question though, like on top of that? So, obviously during the time that you had your music ready produced and, there wasn't Bandcamp and DistroKid or there wasn't that option. Mm-hmm. But now that there is, and let's say because the market has changed in terms of just there's an influx of producers and not enough labels to keep up with, what would you do? Would you then continue to go through the label route, or would you consider self-releasing?
Well, considering the pros and cons, I know one of the cons that I was talking about with Kave, with Pleasurecraft, was with DistroKid, there is so much, just honesty, bad music out there as well. To the point where I'm searching and I see DistroKid, half the time I skip, which is probably my downfall, to be honest. But it's just that it gives the ability to anybody to release anybody. And there's that route that's the issue. But at the same time, if I think about the pros, I think about all the outlets that you can market yourself at well. And if your music is good, it will shine. So for example, you had told me about Playlist Push. That's a great route. So if you self-release and you use Playlist Push and you use Instagram marketing, and you also, one thing you could do where you're going to get a ton of responses is start messaging all the DJs you like on Instagram. Tell them you have an EP coming out. You would love their promo email, and you'd be surprised how many huge artists will reply to you and be happy to give you your email. If you put in the work that the label would do and the budget that the label would do, or hopefully even more than the label would, because you're focusing on yourself, then I think maybe you probably have a good shot. I think maybe if I knew all that, I mean, essentially that is what I do with my own label. If I release on my own label, I'm doing that now. You know what I mean? So
Right,
that's the
right.
case. But something an artist that hasn't been through the ropes has to understand is you got to have a budget aside, and you're gonna have to be doing a lot of emailing, a lot of contacting, and all that. But in that case, I think maybe I would go against my initial response and say, maybe
You're
it's
about
not
to
a bad
add,
idea.
yeah. Well, you're not giving me a chance to give my feedback. You know?
sorry.
No, all good. But hey, I think that is kind of the answer of today, is that there really isn't a right or wrong answer. It's about your approach, right? And for me, it's always a question that I've been asked, Kevin, well, why? Like, why do you want to release on a label, right? And like, as you answer it, it's like, well, I just want my music out there. Well, then the answer can be found by saying, well, you can self-release it via Bandcamp. And my argument would say, well, yes, it's true that those that can self-release, they, whenever there's a platform that you can self-release, there's just going to be more garbage. That's just the truth. But like, I think with a platform like Bandcamp and with the right tagging, there is a better shot in terms of being discovered. I know tons of artists, my peers as well, that actually find music through Bandcamp, and they discover artists via Bandcamp. So, it's really dependent on the platform. I don't really know too much of DistroKid, but it depends on what type of artist you are. If you're more of a top 40 mainstream artist, maybe having your tracks on Spotify and being able to be, have it discovered, that could be it. And yes, you hit it right in the right in the nail with this one, is if you're going to self-release, understand, what you need to be doing in order to give yourself the best shot. Are you investing in promos like Playlist Push? We're giving him a shout out. It's my boy George that is running it. But are you doing the investments? Are you going out there and reaching out to not PR companies but media outlets? We do get independent artists that they are just hitting us up saying, hey, I'm an independent artist. I'm releasing this on Bandcamp. Can you premiere us? And we have done it. We're like, dude, this is awesome, right? And it's not to say that every outlet would, but every outlet would take $20 to $30 of your, and it's you investing in your release. It's no different than that's what labels do, right? And why is it harder for people to get on labels? Is because labels have to spend money on the artists. Why do they want to invest in you? And that's always a very it's a very ambiguous question. Like, well, yes, you're a talented artist, but what is the connection and relationship that you have with the label? And it's no different than getting booked for a gig now these days, right? Like, you want to play a big party, you got to be at a certain level. Like, you want to be on a big label, like you got to have X amount of work that makes sense, or there's a direct connection. And through that connection, your talent gets revealed. And there's all these other things like ghostwriting, all that, which we don't got to use this one to discuss. But, I think ultimately, for your peace of mind, hey, you know what? I've tried it. I've hit up all these labels. It doesn't work. I'm going to just go through the process and then understand. And then from there, be like, oh, maybe that's why it's hard to get signed, because look what a label has to do for each release and for XYZ artists. It puts you in the perspective of the label, and you go, well, and then you have 100 artists barking up the tree, knocking on their email. It's not to discourage, but then it's also to let you understand how it works. And not to ramble on, but I think one of the biggest key takeaways that I can really pinpoint in my journey where everything flipped is this awareness of how things work. And sometimes you don't want to hear the truth. Well, this is how it works. And you're like, oh, pissed, like, oh man, but well, I'm sorry, it's an industry just like it is food and beverage. Let's not even go there. The oil industry, I mean, it's like any other industry. There's hard work that comes along, but there's also this networking. There's also this work versus luck that happens across. And it just depends on how much control you want back, which is why in phase 3, not to spoil the beans, but in phase 3, we are teaching people how to launch their own label. Because ultimately, I've asked around legendary artists, like, hey, if you're 45 now, you're touring the world, but if you're 25 today and nobody knew who you were, what would you do? The answers have been consistently consistent. I would still just launch my own label and take control of that, because I believe in my talents. And owning your own label, your own platform, it gives you that control. It allows you to release on Beatport. It allows you to release on, other music platforms. out there. So it certainly gets your brain thinking in terms of what you want out of it, and ask yourself why.
Yeah.
Why do you want to release? And if it's to get recognized by certain labels or by certain groups, then hey, by all means, go for it. Just know that it's going to be really hard to go through it. But if it's just for exposure to like, hey, get it out there, there's ways you can control that.
One thing that people also pointed out to me was the fact that, like you mentioned, like there's a whole process that goes through it. Someone told me, it's like, well, if you do it yourself, then the label knows that you're willing to work hard. And, people can make good music. It's like a dime a dozen now. It's so easy to make music nowadays, especially with like digital workstations. But they were telling me like, hey, if you're willing to actually go out, promote yourself, release yourself, all that stuff, then even though maybe you don't have like 1,000 followers, at least the label knows, hey, this guy's willing to hustle, guy or gal, whatever, and they're willing to push their own stuff. And so they're a hard worker on top of being a good producer as well. So that's kind of where I was like curious what you guys were thinking about, because I have nothing right now, so no release.
I will go ahead and add that it is true in the sense of like being, even having my promoter hat on, like that is true in terms of sometimes the gig goes to the person that is, equal talent, all that, but just has that extra drive, if you're doing your research. And I would have to imagine that there are some label owners that do use that to judge like, hey, if I'm going to put my dollars on this person, right, in my promo services and my promo push on this artist, which one's going to help really have that impact? I definitely do think that plays a factor. I don't know if you feel otherwise, Gino.
I definitely agree. And it shows that you're working hard. There's no problem with that. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, what I always thought helps the most is if you get your music out there. What I've noticed that helped climb the ladder of success and touring and playing elsewhere and all that was really just having your peers play your music. I think that's what's really important.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And that you can do. And I think that is like the most important thing. And that's why I encourage labels, only because of their promo pool, not because of the money you're going to get, which is forget about it. Not because of any of that stuff. It really is the promo reach. So that way, the more your peers play your music, the more people are going to hear from you. And then that's when the gigs really start rolling. But I'll tell you now, I swear to you, if you start Instagram messaging the artists, a lot of them will give you their, bless you, a lot of them will give you their emails. It's surprising. So I guess in today's world, I guess it is way more possible than how I would think of it, or how I was pretty stubborn on the topic up until pretty much today on self-releasing. Also, one thing too, I've heard your music, so this doesn't count for you, but an artist has to know when they're too excited. I know that there's a lot of artists out there that want to self-release because they're just too excited to get their music out there. And the reason why their music isn't getting signed really is because their music isn't there yet. I promise you that's not the case with you, because I've heard a lot of your tracks. But people more in the beginner stage, they get too excited. So there has to be a fine line between the two that they have to understand as well, Sure. So that's also why I had this bit of like, always like, well, self-release, yes, but because you want to, because you're ready, or because you're too excited. That is something that has to be defined.
Now, so that's actually a question. So if you're a beginner student, like say, and you're in that stage where you're just excited and you just want to release stuff, does that actually hurt you to self-release? Because then you have just like a bunch of stuff that's not...
Well, if the music isn't good,
yeah,
it's in your catalog for life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm having an allergy attack.
I think he is.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this is such a good video, and I'm just like sneezing away right now, but it's okay. I mean, it's all about being authentic, and here we are. And really the good points that you're adding there, Gino, in terms of people get too excited. And hey, I want to throw this back to you, Kevin. Only 10 labels, that's not enough.
Oh yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
So, and this is also another thing. It's a psychology thing, right? A lot of times people need that validation. Well, am I good enough? I think you should try to get an honest feedback from people like Atrox, those that either own a label or have released many, many times on labels, and ask them like, hey, just give me an honest feedback. Is the quality good enough to be signed? And if they say yes, you should try these labels. It already means that it's good enough.
Sure.
So you don't have to question that. Now, being accepted to a label, that's out of your control. But if you want to know if you're good enough, get an honest feedback from it. So yeah.
One thing I could throw in too as well is I had a conversation with Adam Bayer one time, and we were talking about another artist, and I had offered him the demos of another artist that's in the scene.
Mhm.
And he goes, I know this artist. I really like this artist, but I already have his sound on my label.
Ah, okay, yeah. Yeah.
That's what he told me.
Mhm.
So the point is also, how much do you stand out?
Yeah.
If you're creating a sound that's industry standard, the quality is there, he's back. The quality is there, everything is there, but they already have that sound from one of their resident artists,
Mhm.
then there's not much of a reason to take you on.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I really want to, I always focus on with my students when I'm teaching, is that's a big part of our course, is how do we make you stand out?
Yeah.
Because if you sound like everybody else, well, you're a B artist, in my opinion. And a B
Yeah.
artist would be, they'll have a career, they'll put food on the table and everything, but you won't be the king of that sound. When you think of tribal techno or like that, you think D-Unity, like he's that sound, or that rolling
Yeah.
tech house techno. It's Carlo Leo has that sound. These guys have their sounds. You know what I mean? The Dubfire, they're at the top of the pyramid of that sound. And there's other people underneath it that sound somewhat like them.
Yeah.
But in order to be the king of your sound, you know, you really got to sound different than everyone else. And that may be a reason why someone's music could be really good, industry standard, clean, mixed down is fantastic, layout is great, but you sound like every other artist out there.
Yeah, and it's already on the label, and they don't need that. So, I mean, it's a catch-22, and I think that needs to be saved for a different discussion in terms of, you know, that's the technical aspect of why you need to enroll, you know, in your masterclass, right? I mean, and being able to sound design and being able to sound different and not be a copy. I mean, this whole thing, I also think we should mark this down as an action item, that we should invite a label owner, a few label owners, and have them chop it up. Like what, you know, to get them, you know, and like even including to yourself, you know, how they, and I think the more feedback we get, they're going to find out that there's all sorts of different approaches. And I think as we build out these video series, we should totally invite these special guests. You heard it first here on this episode that we're going to start inviting
For the
special
beginning.
guests. But I hope that gives you a well-rounded perspective. I know it is a double-edged sword answer, right? But it really comes down to what perspective you're looking from. Yeah, that's pretty much it for this week's Q&A session.
Oh, yeah.
If you have any other comments, questions, or feedback below, be sure to comment. Be sure to check out the links in the description on how to enroll and how to get in touch with us. All right, we'll catch you in the next episode. We'll see you later.